All right. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to CJ to talk a little bit about data.
Okay, well, if you have met me, there's a good chance that I will start babbling about data and specifically data visualization. I love data visualization. I'm a huge believer in it. And I am very thankful to be here thanks to SDSU, or sorry, SDXD. SDSU was where I got my master's, so both very beneficial. And data visualization has actually allowed me to become a UX designer. And I would not be there without having really stepped and leaned into data visualization. And with data visualization, I went into it by accident. I actually was just working on reports on homelessness, and the data that I had to work with was just raw data. And I don't know if many of you have had to work with raw data, but it can be pretty daunting, where you just have row upon row of numbers and text that just doesn't make much sense. So for me, in order for it to make sense to me, I actually started making just data visualizations for myself. And as I did that, I realized this data went from having no meaning to actually seeing trends come out of it, seeing patterns come out of it, and it's time seeing entire data stories. And for me, I did that initially for myself, but then I started showing it to people and said, people were saying, oh, this is great. This homelessness data is actually starting to make sense to me. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through a journey. We're going to start with some raw data. And then we're going to go to databases for a quick second. And then we're going to go on to how we can create some beautiful data visualizations. Then lastly, we're going to incorporate some of those data visualizations into UX. And we're going to be doing it through our friend, Austin, who is a brand new junior designer. He'll be telling us our story and we'll be able to follow him. That sound good? Okay, so let's meet our new designer. His name is Austin. He's been with the company for roughly 2 months. He's pretty quiet and shy. And while he's been with the company, the UI team has successfully deployed one new UI, and then they were forced to put in a pop-up after that UI was released. So if many of you are where pop-ups, you may have certain feelings towards them. And his team did not like it. It especially bothered them that this pop-up came up the second that you entered the website. So before he or anybody else could get any value from the website, they're required to actually enter information. So he was in a meeting with his boss, and the boss told them, hey, I just heard from corporate that our bounce rate has gone up 50%. And if you're not familiar what a bounce rate is, that's essentially somebody who goes into a website and then bounces back. So that's before the company even has a chance to interact with the individual, make any money, getting a subscription. And corporate was blaming that increased bounce rate on his team. So even though he was quiet and a little timid, he jumped in and talked to his boss and said, hey, I really think this is because of the pop-up. And then his boss said, well, that may be the case, but we don't have a way to solve that or to prove it. So she ended the meeting. Everybody was pretty upset. And also there was possibly looming restructurings within the company. And restructurings are never good if you're anxious. And so he decided that he wanted to look into whether it was a UI problem or whether it was actually due to that pop-up. So he went over and he talked to his data science friend, and his data science friend said, I don't have time to look into the data, but I can show you how you can get that raw data yourself. This scared him, but he said, okay, I'll take a peek and hopefully you can show me. His friend said, that's great. Only got 5 minutes, so we got to rush through it. So despite Austin's anxiety towards data, his friend said, don't worry about it. Raw data is no different than a recipe. It's just essentially, in this case, we've got a recipe. It's 1.5 cups of heavy cream, 1.5 cups whole milk, 2/3 cup cane sugar. And what you can see here is these are the ingredients. And down here, we've just transformed that into a table. And most databases are just made of tables, I'll say for the most case. The one thing that we have done here is we have changed these over to grams, and that allows us to actually use them as measures. So now we can determine the total amount that comes out of each batch, for instance, or we can look at the ratio of heavy cream to sea salt. So that allows us to manipulate the data to actually do some analysis on it. So we said, Austin told his friend, great, get that. Still don't see how this is helping me. So his friend said, okay, glad you got that. Now we need to go on to joins. And he told his friend, okay, take a breath. This sometimes makes people a little nervous, but you can really think about joins as just you being a matchmaker. So we've got two friends. We got this friend over here. We got this friend over here. And they've been dating for a little bit. And they're talking about moving in with each other. But the thing that's most important for, in my opinion, relationships is having common interests. So we see that these two friends, they've got a lot of common interests. They both have ingredient. They both have heavy cream in that ingredient column. They both have sea salt. So you know what? I think they actually it would be really good for them to move in together. So that's what we're able to do is we are just able to grab those two different ingredients, throw it down here. And now we get this guy moving in over here. So it looks like this table actually moved in with the other table, which is very nice of him. And we have this essentially the same table, and now we just have this over here, thanks to ingredient. So Austin said, okay, cool. Like I said, I'm getting a little anxious. Can you like speed it together? And his friend said, okay, this is the last thing that I'm gonna try to teach you. It's gonna include a little bit of programming, but I believe in you. Okay, so we started talking about still using that same recipe analogy. So he said, all you really have to do with SQL, and that's probably the most common way that people grab data, is you just have to say select. So what are you gonna select? In this case, he's gonna grab recipe name from over here. That same place, he's gonna grab ingredient, and then he's gonna need to then grab measuring item from that other table. So then they need to say where it's from. So recipe name, ingredient, he's grabbing that from that recipe. Measuring item, he's grabbing that from over here. And then they need to figure out what that common interest is. And in this case, we got ingredient right there and ingredient right there. So we're saying this is where they match on these two little places. And he added in the last little part where he's specifically interested in vanilla ice cream. So if you want to only look at vanilla ice cream, you can just throw in that where recipe is. So just grab this over here, grab this over here, tell it where it's from, make sure they match, and then add a little statement if you want to limit that down. And Austin was a little anxious, but he said, no worries, my friend. Tonight, if you want to learn more, just go to w3schools.com. Great resource for SQL. Also, Austin highly suggests when you run into issues, just going to copilot.microsoft.com. Fantastic. I use it all the time when I'm writing queries or code. Just say, hey, this isn't working, tell me why. Pop the code in there and usually can fix it for you. So amazing. So Austin spent the rest of the day getting all that data, and he was able to get all the data, and he was really proud of himself. So he went to his boss. And the boss said, okay, great job, you got the data, but what does it mean? I need a story. I need something to be highlighted because right now this is no meaning. So said, okay, so what exactly should I do? And she said, I want to see some data visualizations. I want to make this data come to life. Austin didn't know what to do. So he said, hey, Anna, his boss's name, how do I do that? And luckily, Anna, like me, very passionate about data visualization. So she was more than happy to kind of tell him about it. So she started off on a little bit of a ramble, just because she is excited. So she said, Austin, data visualizations have been going on forever. You can look at some rocks from 1400 BCE. These are maps. And what is a map? It's just data that's drawn out. They're essentially were data visualizations before what we think of as normal data. And then you can see some even like, I call them skeuomorphic designs. So essentially creating something that looks like the real world. In UX, you may have heard that, where you essentially see 1 log, 2 logs, 3 logs, 4 logs, 5 logs. So just very simple. And you can even look at well, not super recent numbers, but Babylonian numbers where we still have 1 stick, 2 sticks, 3 sticks, 4 sticks. So you can see that in many ways, data came from data visualization. So it's been a two-way street. So once again, Austin was like, okay, thanks, this is great to know, but I'm trying to get this done. Can you help me out? And she said, oh yeah, sorry, I got excited. She said, data visualizations can really be built with 4 properties. So we've got size, and size is great to say how big, how many, how much. So great for measures. We've got shape. With shape, it's great to use when you want to make something that actually looks like something in the real world. So for instance, if you're doing, I don't know, a data visualization on different dogs, it'd be great to have different points that look like the different dogs. You've got proximity, and proximity is great for maps. You can see how close something is to each other. It can also be used for instance, like in line graphs for looking how far apart things are in time. So if you're graphing maybe by year, that's one way you can use proximity. And she mentioned color. And she said, dude, be careful with color. It is something I see all the time. If you're using more than 4 colors, stop. What are you doing? Color should be it should either be used for aesthetics, according to company design systems, or to really make something pop. And with color, a good example of how it can be used is with like alerts. So if there's something that's shared across society, you got the green, yellow, red, great use. Throwing in a bunch of colors in a graph, I don't support it, Anna doesn't support it. If you know somebody who supports them, give them my number and I will talk to them. So she said, okay, so this is all you need to know. Now I've got a meeting. And he quickly said, as she ran out, Anna, can't you give me any more help? Like what type of graphs? And she said, just find inspiration. Her classic response. So he went on and he got home at the end of the day, looked for inspiration. And since he was a 20-something-year-old, he pulled out his phone and he quickly saw size, that how much, how many. You can see this is exactly what this donut chart is. So you can see that this is much larger than that. You can also see how size can be used to make something really pop out, where this number, much more important than this other stuff. So size is used there. So it's 2 different ways that size is used in that app. He then was thinking about proximity. What did she mean when she talked about it? I was thinking about going over to friends, and really easy to see. He looked and he was like, oh, wow, this makes so much sense. I've got this friend who's very far away. Some things are close to that. That's proximity. So we had 2 down. He was thinking, he said, what does she mean by shape? And he couldn't find anything on his phone. But then just as he was about to give up, he looked to the top right and said, oh, that's a great example of shape. You can see that these are just icons that essentially are bar graphs. So you see that we've got the cell, Wi-Fi, and then the battery. And the battery is just a great example where it's literally a bar chart turned 90 degrees with a battery around it. Then lastly, he grabbed Wordle because like most of us, he loves Wordle and he needed a quick little break. So he finished the puzzle, he was stoked, and then realized, oh, this is a great use. One thing sticks out, and as I'm sure if you've used Wordle, you never have to be taught what this green is. It pops out and you immediately know this is what it was supposed to do. So with these concepts in his mind, he realized he had to make a data visualization to give meaning to this data. So his boss and his friends had mentioned, dude, you can just do this in Excel. That's one way you can just, instead of trying to analyze the data one by one, you can just grab the data, click on one of those graph buttons, and it'll give you a suggestion. Similarly, Tableau Public, you can use it for free, a great tool to use, or there's some paid tools like Power BI. So and I will show you what he created for his boss. Hopefully it's here. Yeah, there we go. So he went in, and this is what he created for his boss. And this was his first time creating a data visualization. But his boss was very pleased. She could tell that he had paid attention So he was interested in that bounce rate. And those were really important. So he made those numbers big. And you can see before the UI change, 20%. After that UI change, 18%. Then actually that UI had decreased the bounce rate. But once we see that pop-up show up, bounces up to 50%. So he's got those numbers there, helpful, but doesn't tell the entire story. So he decided to do a little more, and he went into size. So size, just how big is a bar? That how much, how many? And you can see that we're all good, we're all good. Hit that pop-up, boom, high pop-up rate. And then he knew that the pop-up was actually implemented according to time zone. So he knew that it would hit here first, there second, third, and fourth. So he thought, okay, well, if I can graph this out where you see it happening just 1/1, that's really good proof. So that's exactly what he did. So he went and there we go. So he said, okay, this is what it's looking like beforehand. And we see, we reconnect, hopefully. There we go. We see that that first hour happens, and you see that this immediately went to that 50%. Then he went on. And then the other one went to 50%. And then we continue to another 50% and another 50%. So he showed this to his boss. His boss was stoked, said that she was going to take it to the senior leadership right away. If I can get back to my PowerPoint. There we go. That he would take it straight to leadership, or she would. And she came back and said, senior leadership saw it and they loved it. And they realized that it actually wasn't the UI that had caused the issues. It was that pop-up, the pop-up that they didn't want, that pop-up that as a UX designer, they didn't want, but they were forced to have. So they told the team, okay, you don't have to worry about the upcoming layoffs and I mean restructuring. You all are safe from it, and you guys are doing a great job, especially Austin. And we're so happy that you solved this problem, not only to protect your team, but for the overall company. So overall, yeah, sure. There we go. There we go. So during that time, he was able to save his team with data. He was able to, he was able to overcome his fears that he initially had of data. Like, I think when I talk to a lot of people, people mention their fears or anxiety that data creates. And he stepped past that when he had to, and he learned that it's really not that bad. It's like a recipe, and then you can use that data just to create visuals to give it meaning. And during that time, yeah, learned about databases, learned about SQL, learned about storytelling principles using data visualization, and he saved the team. So now that we have all learned that, it is time for us to go and do an exercise. And also, even before I get that, any questions anybody has? Always welcome. Yes. Oh, I got a few. That's a good question. So JJ, he was up working on his Tableau thing, and it just wasn't working out well for him. So he decided to change his name. He did a Control Shift and replaced it, but for some reason didn't change it in his mind. I think that's why. Any other questions? Okay, go for it.
Thank you for the presentation.
Of course.
That was a very, very good. Can you explain some of the pitfalls of using color and why you're
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
maybe
good
against
question.
it?
Yeah, so color is everything in a data visualization should play a purpose. So a lot of times I'll see data visualizations where I'll see somebody have like, you know, I don't know, scatter plot or something, you know, where there's just a bunch of different points and they'll have 10 different colors. And the colors don't have any meaning. And you'll sometimes see in a legend like, okay, orange means A, green means B, this. And so then if a user is looking at the data visualization, they have to constantly look there, look over, look there, look over. And especially if you get similar colors, then you end up with that problem happening even more and more. So it really takes away their concentration from, you know, reading the data visualization, which as UX designers, you know, We want to continually work to decrease the mental burden that we put on our users. Any other questions? Yeah.
In a sense, I guess you say like the permissions to focus on this issue, like the process for him, for his team to be comfortable with it, going deep into this instead of maybe working with something.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah. So the question was essentially, how did he get permission to spend his time doing that instead of on the other stuff? Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think that if many of you have been, just using my own experience, if many of you have been in jobs where you either really want to learn something or you feel like it's mandated, or if you're in a situation like this where his team is possibly in trouble and he goes to his boss and says, hey, I may be able to solve this. I may not have these skills, but I'm willing to, work at night. I'm learning to put time in to learn this. In my experience, most bosses, I'll say good bosses, are more than happy to have, especially people like UX designers, to have them learn some development skills, some data skills. And likewise, a lot of developers, their bosses want them to learn UX skills, because the more you can work with developers, data scientists, just the better everybody is off. Yeah. Yeah.
Which line and what? What would you suggest instead of using color?
Yeah, great question as well. So the question is, if you're doing line charts, essentially, how should you do it differently if you're using a bunch of colors? That's a really good question. And in general, I try to make my general rule is like 3 or 4 colors. And usually there's something that's specifically interesting or important. And so if you're using colors, you're choosing colors not according to essentially what's most important, then maybe you can rethink that. So for instance, what I'll a lot of times do is if I'm doing something with a lot of lines within, line chart, what I'll do is I'll sometimes take like the 1 or 2 that really are outliers or what's really important, and then I'll put the other ones, like I'll make them gray, but like really make them so you can't see them as much. So then users can see, okay, all this other stuff is going on, but really I need to pay attention to this. So there's going more on that. So, yeah, I mean, either you can use, stuff like shade or width to just make certain things stand out, or you can do something like a spark lines, which is essentially if you've got a bunch of different lines, instead of having it all in one, you'd have them like little ones on top of each other, which can be, you see it with a lot of times with stocks, and it's good for seeing if something's like if there's a sharp turn in it. So it's really about making sure that you're displaying what the user needs to know. Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
You mentioned spark lines. That's an Edward Tufte thing, if I recall.
So he talks about spark
Yeah.
lines a lot and
Okay.
visual, what's it called?
Yeah. Well, he has 4 thick books,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
which is part of my question. Given that if you're trying to tell a story about a very particular
Yep.
situation, and you have so many different ways to do this, like, yeah, the Edward Tufte, he's just very creative in how he can represent things.
Yep.
There are also probably hundreds of visualization libraries,
Mhm.
like what, C3JS
Yeah.
and so forth, to choose from. How do you go about putting together a way to represent a novel situation in an effective way? Do you play with different sketches or
Yeah, so a
libraries,
lot of
things like that?
times, I've got a big notepad that's next to my computer that just has hundreds of just garbage graphs. Where I'll just go and I'll spend like 5 seconds and be like, blah, 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 just randomly seeing if anything kind of sticks. And then I'll go to requirements and I'll think about if we have user personas, if we have like requirements within those user personas. So it's really important to know who the graph is for and the purpose of it. Because it's something where you just really want to make sure that you're not creating something where all things are equal. You really want to make sure that the most thing really stands out the most. And it really just varies. I encourage, to try out different graphs, trade them out, see how it looks, see if it, I'll sometimes just share stuff with, my friends and ask like prompts. Go ahead.
I think I briefly heard you say you do some of your own coding. How often do you use a pre-made library widget versus code up your own visualization?
So what I do now is when we're building applications, so I don't usually actually build the graphs. So I will I'll look at the data in the database using SQL, for instance, and then I'll go and create whatever graphs I want. And then I'll usually do something like a mixture in between that and Figma, and then hand it to a developer from there. Because that's just kind of next level. And I think that my time is better. You should definitely work across, teams, but there's definitely some value in doing what you're hired to do. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have any recommendations about color applications for resources? I mean, color applications and accessibility as well?
For any recommendations?
Recommendations on resources, yes.
Oh, I mean, so Tableau has a beautiful library of how-tos. It's very Tableau centric on how to build stuff, but you can learn a lot by building that, and it'll tell you about the reasons for each chart. Some of the Tufty books are great. They can be a little thick, and they also, you have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt because he kind of has a cult following. So yeah, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a cop out, but just, the more you do it, the more, it'll make sense. And also, I'm sure what a lot of times I'll do when I'm starting a new data visualization is I'll go through Google and or Tableau Public or something, just type in something that's kind of similar, see if somebody has created it, how I can take that concept and make it my own. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question over here.
Oh,
You want me to stand up? I can
sure.
stand up.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so at the beginning, you mentioned how data visualization has existed for thousands, millions of years. So this is has existed, and UX design is data visualization, right?
Yeah, I'd argue that. Yeah.
So what in your industry in data visualization, what is, like, if you zoom out around this decade, what's really going on? Like, what are your main focuses? Like, where is there a lot of room for improvement?
In data visualizations, you mean?
Data visualization.
So I think that I think there needs to be a lot of improvements on data literacy, just as us, not only UX design, but as us in society, data literacy and data visualization literacy, because I see a lot of just garbage charts out there, and I think that there should be talented people who know what the users are thinking, but a lot of times you just don't see that. So I think that there's a mixture in between. People need to learn how to kind of read graphs. And for instance, you see some graphs where this personal pet peeve, where we'll see some graph like this, and then it'll show two lines are very similar, and then one changes a little bit. And then if you're not paying attention, you're like, wow, this went up 20%. But then you look at the legend, and it starts at like 5,000 instead of starting at 0. So it's really a mixture in between. It's like UX, where if we're working in data visualizations, we need to understand what the people know, and we need to meet them at their level. And also, I think as a user, and as a society, there is an obligation for us to continue to grow and to learn how different graphs are used. And also I should mention what I have seen, which has been really nice, is I've seen a movement towards simpler visualizations and more uses of shapes and stuff like that, instead of just having text all over the place.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And to answer your question, one thing that I do is I use ChatGPT. So I'll ask it, or any LLM, I ask it, like, hey, this is what I'm trying to visualize,
Yeah,
you know, be creative.
yeah, absolutely. We got a few more. Okay.
I find that there's a little bit of a clash for me when it comes to data visualization between providing the adequate amount of detail versus making it simple and readable.
Yep.
And like easy to digest. I was wondering if you had any tips on like finding that balance between
Yeah.
level of detail.
So
and
how
readability.
I like to usually visualize, if I'm creating like a dashboard, for instance, what I generally do is I like it to essentially tell a story and kind of let somebody decide where they want that story to end. So I like to start with BANs, big ass numbers, as we call them. And then if you're somebody who doesn't need to read the rest of that story, you have those right there. And then I'll bring down next with a graph or two with a little more detail. And then I'll kind of continue to do that until you end up with just raw data that can be filtered. So it really starts at because even if you want to know the little bits of detail, it's important for you to know that information at the top.
Okay, so you're saying like start top level, just the most basic sort of information you need,
Yeah.
and then giving you the ability to dive deeper.
Yeah, and depending on if it's on a application and so forth, I also screw around a little bit with eye tracking. So DF, I don't know if you guys have seen it. Yeah, but so I'll sometimes we'll move, if I've got like 2 or 3 charts, that's the second line down, I'll like move them. But yeah, top to just simplest, think about how we read and top to bottom.
And just a quick follow-up on that. Do you have any thoughts on interactive data visualization? So like
Yes,
being able to interact with it and, you know.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that interactions are great. I think that there are, we shouldn't assume that our users know where to click. I see that a good amount. And actually, I'm going to show you one where I will admit that it's not clear where to click. But yeah, I mean, it's great, especially if you have different user groups so that they can, like, for instance, in my world, we'll have different companies making different plane parts, and they're only interested in, you know, their own type. So just the very top, having some boxes and then being able to be like, yeah, this is me, obviously, and having everything else filter down.
I know you was talking before, like interacting with developers. So I guess one is, I'm curious, do you interact with front end, back end developers?
Yeah.
And also kind of what's the handoff process?
Yeah, so I work with everybody. Because a lot of, so I was part of a data science team. And then I actually, I pretended to be part of the application team, like literally showed up at their stand-up every single day until everybody on that team thought I was part of that team. And a couple of the designers, or the developers were like, wait, you aren't on our team. And then the director learned about it and was like, wait, you're on that team. So I work on the entire side. Now I am officially on the application side, but all the applications use data. And for me to do effective data visualizations, I have to understand the data. And so it's really, and then, yeah, we'll do some with, front end. And then also, so it's really, I'm just all over the place. Yeah.
I think we had one more question.
I liked his point about, data visualization being really a core part of UX. What was occurring to me is that in trying to understand how to present a story or data is really doing research. And I wonder if you could speak to that, like how actual people using that visualization what's the mental model about what they think is going on in the world?
100%, yeah.
And how do you build from that? Do you actually do research like that where you try to understand?
Yeah, so a lot of times I end up working with the data scientists a lot because I need to understand the data. And, if we'll see stuff like subcomponent, component, you know, and all this stuff. And then I'll have a stakeholder saying, oh, I need to see this information about a component, and I need to understand, do they mean subcomponent or component? And so there's, yeah, there's just a lot of research knowing what the data means. That's become super, super important. And a lot of times data processes will screw up the data. Yeah, I mean, ideally you should know where the data starts and where it ends. That's not always possible. And then knowing the user, you know, going back to the UX part and knowing, are these people aware of the terminology we're using, and who's going to use it and why? And I'll add to that what I have learned, I used to try to get everything possible into one dashboard or one data visualization. But I've learned that oftentimes for the different users, different groups, it's better to actually create two different visuals.
Yeah, I like your word you used at the beginning too, skeuomorphism, where
Thank
you're
you.
trying to relate something you're presenting to something in the real world that's affecting people, or that they can have a metaphor.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Ask the question. We have time for one more question.
I definitely am interested in your perspective when it comes to too much color, maybe more visually distracting than helpful. I was wondering if you had a thought about if there's too many patterns or different types of shapes, would that also ring true? Or is there a ratio between how much color and patterns and shapes?
Yeah, I mean, so I've seen different ratios all over the place. But my general rule is just, I always start my graphs in black and white, and I try to see how much I try to start them in black and white without any text, see how far I can get with that. And if you're using color, that's fine, just try to minimize it. Once you start working with shapes, if you're using colors and shapes and you require a legend for both of them, that's probably time to bring in like another graph.
I think that's for all the questions we have.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, so for the activity, what I thought would be fun for us is gonna get you into groups of 4. Let's go with 4. And we are going to create a data visualization. You can also think about it as an app, whatever you'd like, to help people find Bigfoot. Because Bigfoot he's a threat to all of us. So we have to find him. And I want you to think about you can create whatever data set you want. Just think about, time of day, location, whatever you want. So you don't actually need to create tables or anything. Just imagine what would be good. Imagine that you have a UX designer and UX researcher and all the money you need to go and find whatever data you need. So think about what you need, then go and sketch out how you'd represent this data in a visual format. So remember what I talked about with shape, size, proximity, color, and then going on to kind of more the app side, starting to lean that way. Think about how you could add interactions to assist users in finding Bigfoot. And so we'll break you into groups of 5, I think. I'll get Antonio. Do you want to help me break them into 5? And then, so all of you will get one, or I guess groups of 3. Is that what? Okay, groups of 3 works. Yeah. So we're gonna break you into groups of 3, and then we'll give you 10 minutes. And then anybody who's courageous enough to show what they have created as a group of 3, it would be great to see what you guys have in mind. And in case you are, oh, weird, I got muted. In case you don't kind of know where to start, this is just what I did with this. I can exit out of here. Come on. I'm trying to escape. There we go. So just to give you an example, so what I did is there's a wonderful live set where there's a nonprofit that you can report sightings of Bigfoot too. So once again, really important that we find him or her, because we got to make sure we get rid of this nightmare that's coming. So what I did was I just took that data set and saw that it's people who are either saw Bigfoot themselves, their friend saw Bigfoot, or just somebody heard about someone seen Bigfoot. For me, I've got limited PTO, so I want to make sure that I'm going during the right month. So what I did, like this is interactive, and going back to what I actually said was not great about this is it's not super clear what you can click on. So this is using Tableau. If this was an application, I would definitely do some stuff to change that. So let's try to reconnect. There we go. Okay, so as somebody who's trying to find Bigfoot, I am only interested in people who have actually seen Bigfoot. I don't trust other people. I need to find my time for PTO, and July is looking good. And a lot of people see Bigfoot. I have heard that moon stage can have a large effect on whether you see him or her, them, however they identify. So I've decided, hey, okay, so I know I want to go during July. I want to hit that stage moon correctly. Let's go and look there. And for state, I'm going to go to Washington because that looks like the biggest spot. And then now, for instance, you can see down here that we've got actual details. So we can see that, somebody saw them head on B Street to Wishka Road and all these actual, descriptions of where you could find them. So that's one way I would do it. It's obviously, you can do it however you'd like. And I'm looking forward to seeing however you decide to do it. So go for it.
You. Okay, we are the group number 3, and we create a couple of charts. So our statement is that we want to capture Bigfoot, and we notice that Bigfoot likes to eat snails. So we are first trying to see where we can find the shells the most around California. So for that, we created a couple of charts. So the first one tells us the days of a month, and it will also tell us the time of the day. And based on the graph, we can see that the majority of the sightings they happen at around the night. So we know that that would be a good time to go and capture Bigfoot. And then we created also a heat map. This is California. This is not a sock. This is California. And based on this chart, we can determine that we can go at night around San Jose to capture Bigfoot because we are going to find the shelter.
Nice job. I think all of you are actually doing really good jobs of doing states, much better than I could do. We got, yeah.
All right, so thank you. Lost an apparatus. So we're team 6. Christian, that's Allison, and we are looking at 2 different types of data. There are probably sightings of just footprints, and there might be direct sightings as well. So we're collecting 2 different streams of data, and the footprints people are probably going to be able to follow. So there'll be tracks that they might be, if we put out a Bigfoot app, they can track along with it, and we can get some, curvilinear data. The direct sightings are more just point-based, and so we're looking at, again, California, not a sock. Looking for, you can choose to put one or both, heat maps, and we're looking for correlations of where the tracks might, lead to sightings, and maybe even pictures if people have captured an actual picture. So given that, we also have a clock, what time of day or night? And so if you want to, you could differentiate the data by, choosing your time and seeing when not when the tracks, but when the actual sightings have occurred. Just to try to narrow down where you might want to show up if you want to actually try to get your own Bigfoot data. Anything else, Christian?
Perfect.
Okay. That's it.
Okay, do we have any other teams?
Thank you. Okay, so our concept is kind of a hybrid of like a Google Earth and the Bigfoot. So it's Bigfoot Explorer. So it's visual. This is supposed to be a area of land. Doesn't look like anything, but you know, a United States. Why not? And then it's plot. And it has a bunch of data points plotted there, so you could kind of see density of data. It also has different types of markers and shapes. We're tracking many parameters that you can filter on in this top left: gender, age, location, date. And we even allow them to upload photographs of their sighting too, so you can tap on one of them and see what they look like on that data point. You can zoom in, zoom out, and I think that summarizes it. Did I miss anything? Are we?
Depending on the point you click on, it will also display that.
Yep, that's right. Yep, all the parameters that we're tracking will get displayed as well. So there you go. Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. I think, yeah. So I'm just going to say thank you very much for creating all of those beautiful data visualizations. It was fun to see you guys having fun with that, and it seems like you guys learned a lot. Once again, this is CJ Robertson. I also go by Charles here at SDXD, and thank you once again for letting us be here. Really appreciate it. This is at Edge once again, and I'm going to let Antonio take it home.
All right. So, and CJ, just can I ask a huge favor? So online we have 3 questions, and I just wanted to honor the people online that have shown up. So we have like about 12 people that are tuning in from everywhere, I guess. And so let's see, just question 1. What's the difference between the data visualization done by data scientist and by UX engineer?
So I will say that I mean it's just their jobs. I know a lot of the data scientists, they've made some beautiful graphs and some beautiful data visualizations. That's not their specialty, and people tend to do best what they practice all the time. But like I said, I work with a number of data scientists that make beautiful data visualizations. A lot of times they're very what I see a lot of times is just very overly complex graphs, I'll say. A lot of times looking at the specific data. So graphs about the data.
Right. All right. Okay, thanks for that. And then question 2, if you're designing data visualization for a specific interface, example, dashboard or a mobile app showing a patient's medical data to nurses, could you talk about some methods to find useful when testing them with users? I can repeat it.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're deciding data visualizations for a specific interface,
Okay.
like a dashboard or mobile app that shows patients' medical data to nurses.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I'm with you.
Okay. Could you talk about some of the methods you find useful when testing those visualizations with users?
So what I generally do, regardless of what I'm testing, I'm a huge fan of prompt-based testing. So once I get kind of something going, well, I'll usually do some initial research to get things kind of moving in that direction. And then kind of halfway through, I'll start doing some prompt-based testing because I know hopefully at that point, the business requirements, what they need to accomplish, especially with like nurses, for instance. And I'll say, hey, can you find this person's history of blood pressure, something like that? And then I'll see if they can do it. And if they can, great. If they can't do it, then we need to look into it further. And obviously data visualizations in the ideal world, they should be responsive like everything else we do. In UX, it can be challenging at times. So a lot of times we are focused to only include the most important parts.
Cool. All right. And question number 3 and the last question.
Okay.
Any key tips to consider when consider from the accessibility standpoint, the point of view?
Yeah, I think that accessibility, when I think about accessibility, and this is my own personal opinion, is it's really trying to make sure that your products get out to everybody who needs to see it. So there are really good, rules in general, font size, deciding whether you want to use green, how much finger movement you need to have that I try to follow. And if it's an app, I'll run it through a tester for that. Also making big, changes in contrast. So there are definitely the principles that you use in applications, you should also try to use in data visualizations, and not just people that sometimes will get classified as in certain groups, but just for everybody. You want everybody to be able to understand and use your applications.
All right. So those are all the questions online. Thanks for the people online for being here and also participating in the activity. We had two groups of 5 people, so they presented to each other.
Yeah,
and
anybody online or out here, if you've got any questions, love talking about this. We'll talk about it all day and all night, so feel free to ask.
Yeah. And we're recorded this, so we'll post it online in a couple of days, hopefully.
And thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you.